Welcome everybody to Mostly Mets, and today what I'd like to do is not talk about the last couple of terrible days in Philadelphia and yell and scream about how the Mets are a terrible team and they had these two losses, or scream about Sean Manaea or the offense or whatever. That's not what this is about. First off, because honestly I just don't care that much anymore. I watch these games with hope that maybe they'll figure it out, but at this point I don't see it happening. I don't see that that's going to happen. There's 17 games left in the season. The Mets are still, if the season ended today, in a wild card spot. But they're only 2 games up on a team that sold a player to the Mets at the trade deadline. The Mets have not played well in a long time. If you go back to June, I think the Mets have the second or third worst record in baseball. At one point they were 21 games over 500. Now I think it's 7. So they're 14 games under since June. So we could talk all we want about, the offense and Sean Manaea and Senga and all this stuff. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. Mets are a terrible team right now. And hey, Philly fans, feel free to dunk. We all dunked on you when you came to Citi Field and got swept. By the way, you still can't win in Citi Field against this crappy Mets team. I don't know what's wrong with you. But yeah, we're getting our asses kicked right now in Philadelphia. Hopefully that changes, right? I'm still sitting here with hope, hoping that maybe something will turn around, but I don't expect it anymore, and honestly, neither should you. Nobody should expect anything out of this team. They're lifeless offensively. They can't pitch. We have some young stars, some young pitchers that we think are going to be stars moving forward, but they're not going to carry you in a playoff series. Maybe McLean it could kind of arrive in a playoff series, but these guys aren't ready to be, your 1, 2, and 3 starters in the playoffs. There's nobody else you really trust. And the big conversation right now is, do the Mets need to be shaken up? And a lot of people say Mendoza needs to be fired or Stearns needs to be fired. They've been talking about Chavez and, Barnes being fired all season long. But is it actually going to happen? And the truth is, no. Nobody's going to be fired. And you've seen Cohen is not going to fire Stearns after a couple of seasons when he waited years to sign this guy as president of baseball operations. He waited for years just to have the opportunity to hire David Stearns. He's not letting him go after 2 years. It's never going to happen. Now, if you want to criticize David Stearns and say he should have done this, he should have went harder after Crochet, or he should have... Those are all legitimate concerns. But we have to give David Stearns some time here. You need to give him 5 years, at least. Because it's his vision now for the team moving forward. It's him with Steve Cohen. It's their vision moving forward. He's not going anywhere. And then you want to talk about Carlos Mendoza. Is he going to be fired? No, he's not. Not because I think he deserves to get another shot. But David Stearns has already said he loves working with Mendoza. Mendoza is not going anywhere. He thinks of him as a premier manager. He's going to be part of this team going forward. David Stearns isn't reactionary. He's not just going to fire a guy because of a bad season. It's not going to happen. They're going to give him more time. At least another year, 2, 3 years, before they really make a decision. Now, if you ask me, if all of a sudden I change shoes with Steve Cohen and I'm the owner of the Mets, is this something that I agree with? Yes and no. David Stearns, to me, is a slam dunk to stay. You could say whatever you want about him, and you have valid concerns. He still kind of operates in some ways like a small market GM. He doesn't really necessarily like the big moves. He likes getting these maybe guys on some prove-it deals. Frankie Montas, 2 years, $34 million. I know a lot of people think that's a lot of money, and it is. It's $34 million. He got paid as a back-end starting pitcher. The second year is what people have the problem with. Walker Buehler didn't get a second year. He's already been DFA'd. I understand the Frankie Montas thing is a disaster. And there's been other signings and other trades that have not worked out. Look at this last year's trade deadline. It was terrible. Cedric Mullins has done nothing, and I hated that deal. Honestly, I can't say hated it, because at the time, maybe I was excited just to have a warm body in center field, but I never wanted Cedric Mullins. He wasn't a game changer. He wasn't a needle mover. He's not what they needed. Ryan Helsley turned out to be a terrible trade. He's been awful since coming to the Mets. Rogers has been okay, pretty good. Soto has been up and down. They didn't really get better at the trade deadline. Yes, they have a higher ceiling in that bullpen, but it hasn't worked out so far. Now, I think you keep him for the reasons that we talked about before. He needs time. He needs time to further his vision of this team, along with Steve Cohen, what they expect to be in the future. The Mets have improved. They have. Whether we want to admit it or not, the reason that we're so mad about the way they're playing right now is because for the first time in a long time, they've had high expectations. The Mets are never the team with expectations. Maybe in 2006 and 2007, every 10 years, maybe the Mets have some expectations. But even when the Mets were in the World Series in 2015, that was a dead team. That was a lame duck team. And then they got Cespedes, and everything changed. But that wasn't a good team. The 2015 team wasn't good. They just had a generational run by Daniel Murphy, Yoenis Cespedes. Those guys really pushed them into that. Was the 2021 and 2022 teams good? I don't think they were all that good. Look what they did in the playoffs. This is the first time the Mets have had real expectations. And I don't think we really know how to deal with that. We expect them now to win the World Series every year. And that's not going to happen. But we are in the conversation for a playoff team and being a good team every single year going forward. It's just how it's going to be. So the expectations that are on us, we're just not used to. And that's why this is all happening. This is why everyone's panicking. Everyone's freaking out. It's just, I don't think they were quite ready to compete yet. Pitching-wise especially. But now you see with those young guys in McLean and Sproat and Tong, Peterson, if he can get it together. There's a good core of pitchers there. Maybe they go out and add another starter. I don't think Stearns is really going to do that, to be honest with you, unless it's a young guy with a lot of control. I don't really see that being something he does. They have the number one farm system in Major League Baseball. That's obviously going to change now that they've called up the young guys, but they have one of the best farm systems in baseball. So everything's trending in the right direction. So you're not going to fire David Stearns when things are trending up. You're just not. Last year kind of was a fluke. The Mets were not a great team. They got hot at the right time, made it to the National League Championship. Were they great? No, they're better this year. The Mets are a better team this year than they were last year, but they're struggling because pitching, injuries, all those things happened. Now, if you want to talk about Mendoza, do I think that he should be fired if the Mets collapse and don't make the playoffs? Or let's say they make the playoffs and lose 2 straight games and get knocked out by the Dodgers. Yes, I personally would fire Mendoza. It's not that I don't like him, not that I don't think he could be a good manager in the future. I just think he wouldn't be the right manager for this team. Because clearly, whatever he's saying isn't working. You could be a great manager, but you might not be a great manager for a specific group. And it feels like right now maybe that's what Mendoza is. Because he's still a young manager. He's still trying to figure it out. But he's got these veteran players. Lindor, Soto, Alonso, Nimmo. These are all McNeil. They're veteran players. And whatever he's saying doesn't really seem like it's resonating at this point. Now, I don't think they will. Just to clarify, I don't think Mendoza does get fired. It's just me personally what I would do. Mendoza would be let go if the Mets don't make the playoffs. Now, if they make the playoffs, maybe they win a round in the playoffs. I know that's a crazy concept at this point to even think that that's possible, but what if they do? Then no, I wouldn't let them go because they were able to figure it out. There's more. I put this more on Mendoza than I do on Stearns at this point. Now, do I think that there's anything he could really do to fix it? No. He's kind of has what he's given, right? The pitchers, the injuries, all that. Yeah. Do I think he could have performed better this year? I don't know. But you look at some of his in-game decisions, who he decides to go to in the bullpen, using Ryan Stanek in a one-run game in the 8th inning. Those are bad decisions. And we've seen them time and time again with him. Could you say over time he'll figure it out, he'll get better at it? Sure, maybe. But do you let a guy continue to manage and figure it out when you have this veteran roster who, at least offensively, can win? This Mets offense can win. You can win a World Series with this Mets offense. The pitching, another story. And I understand there's injuries. But last year, the Dodgers won the World Series with no pitching staff. Every Dodgers pitcher was hurt. Every starting pitcher for the Dodgers was hurt last year. They were throwing bullpen games in the World Series. Walker Buehler was starting games. A guy who got released by the Red Sox this year. He was starting games in the NLCS last year against the Mets. So you could say whatever you want. If you're good enough in other areas, you can overcome those things. Now, I'm not comparing the Mets to the Dodgers. The Dodgers still had an elite bullpen. They had a great farm system, a great offense. The Mets aren't the Dodgers of last year. The Dodgers aren't the Dodgers this year that they were last year. But overall, a good manager, which I don't know that Dave Roberts really is either, with his in-game decision-making. But if you're a great organization, you kind of overcome those things. And it has to fall on someone, and to me, that's Mendoza. They need a new voice. That something's not resonating. I don't know what it is, but something isn't resonating. Maybe it's a personality conflict between Lindor and Soto or whatever, but that's the manager's job to figure out. That's the manager's job to fix. And if it's not being fixed, then someone's got to go. And it's usually going to be the manager. They get someone else in there to try to fix that relationship. And I'm not saying that there's an issue. I'm just saying something's happening. I don't know. But me personally, yes, Mendoza would be gone if the Mets complete their collapse that they're currently on. Now, who I think will be the scapegoat of this season, if it continues the way it's going, is going to be Chavez and maybe even Hefner. I think the coaching staff will see a lot of shakeup. I don't think Chavez will stay around. And honestly, Chavez, for me, you can get rid of him tomorrow. There's been talk all year. The Mets' approach has been off. Fire Chavez. I agree with some of it, I'm not going to lie. But I also don't think it makes that big of a difference. Because we saw in August, for most of August, the Mets were the best offensive team in baseball. They were scoring 8, 10, 12 runs a game. So if it works in August, how come it's not working in July and September? I don't know that the approach is wrong. Maybe it's just the wrong core of guys. Maybe it's the wrong group of players. But Chavez will be the scapegoat if this continues. And I think for the first time since he's been here, Hefner's in trouble. He's like a cockroach. He's gone through multiple regimes, multiple owners, multiple GMs, player baseball. He's the only guy who sticks around. And last year, fixed Luis Severino, right? Severino's been terrible this year. When he was with the Mets, he wasn't terrible. He wasn't great. Fans definitely think back on him so fondly. He wasn't that good. He had a few good starts, don't get me wrong, and he gave you innings, which was important. He wasn't that great. Let's just be perfectly honest about that. He fixed Sean Manaea, who has now regressed. Now, we know with Manaea what it is. It's that loose body in his elbow. No matter how much he wants to say it, it's not bothering him. He's fine. The Mets say he's fine. It's not bothering him. He's not the same guy. And I've seen a lot of people say, well, you signed a guy who was a career 4.5 pitcher, and then last year he was a 3.5 pitcher, and you expected him to be that and not the 4.5 pitcher. But he was never this bad. In his entire career, he never had a 6 ERA. So if you want to say he's regressed back to what he was, well, he's a career like 4.10 pitcher, which is a middle to back end of the rotation guy. So he hasn't regressed to what he was before last year. He's regressed to an unusable pitcher. That's just a fact. He's regressed into being a guy that you cannot count on to give you 5 innings, even though he did last night, or give up less than 5 or 6 runs in a game. You just can't rely on it anymore. So you've seen the regression of guys like Manaea and Senga, and they've all had injuries. So I think that might be a reason why Hefner's gone as well. I think it could easily be a whole new coaching staff. Keep the manager and bring in a whole new coaching staff. I could definitely see that being a possibility. And that's more likely than I think Mendoza or Stearns being the one that gets the blame for this. Now, if you ask me who's at fault for this season, it's the offense. And I don't really care what anyone says about Eric Chavez or Jeremy Barnes or any of these guys. I don't care. This is an offense with Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, Jeff McNeil. Francisco Alvarez. Go down the list. Mark Vientos. Even Brett Beatty, he hasn't been terrible this season. He's been pretty good. This is a team that has a great offense, and then they just go to sleep. They scored 8, 10, 12 runs for 2 weeks straight, and then they get shut out by the Phillies, and then don't get a hit for 4 innings in the next game, and tonight it'll probably be more of the same, and tomorrow it'll be more of the same, and then they'll go home and they'll start scoring a couple runs, and then they'll just go to sleep again. And they do that too much. I understand baseball is a very streaky game. You're going to have hot streaks and you're going to have cold streaks. It's just how the game works. But this team, I've never seen guys get this hot and this cold seemingly in just a day or two. Juan Soto will be red hot for 3 days. And then all of a sudden he can't buy a hit. Lindor will go a month without hitting a double. And then all of a sudden, he has 15. He's 15 for 17. Baseball's like that. It's streaky. Most baseball players are streaky. But not this streaky. There's times where this whole team goes cold. And it's contagious. And it just moves to the next guy. Lindor's cold. Well, then Soto gets cold. And then Alonso gets cold. And then, then Nimmo gets cold. And they all just go silent at the same time. And then when they start hitting, it gets contagious, and they all start hitting. I've never seen such an inconsistent offense in my life. Especially one that's supposed to be a top 5 offense in baseball. At least on paper, should be a top 5 hitting team in baseball. And maybe their stats they're still in the top 10 or whatever. That's because they bludgeon teams sometimes. And then sometimes they cannot buy a hit. And it's ridiculous. This offense is the issue. This core should probably be broken up. I would hate to see Alonso go, but maybe it's a good thing. He's been their only consistent hitter all year, even though he's not that consistent either. He's also a very streaky guy. But he's been their only good hitter with runners in scoring position, and he's really stepped up this season. But maybe he's the guy to go, just because he's going to be a free agent, and maybe they say, we just need to break up this core. We need to change our DNA a little bit. Maybe that's what happens. Would I love it? No, I don't want to see Alonso go anywhere. But maybe it needs to happen. Maybe. Maybe it will actually boost them. Give someone else a chance at first base. Mark Vientos probably ends up at first base, unfortunately. But something's got to change with this core because this cannot continue to be a problem year after year. What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results? It's kind of what we've been doing for a few years now. Yes, we added Soto to this core, but it's basically the same guys. Lindor, Alonso, Nimmo, McNeil, Alvarez. It's the same guys. And yes, you add Soto into that hoping that it will change, and it hasn't. He's just kind of joined the party. And yes, he's had a fantastic year. And he's going to hit 40 home runs, and he's got 30 stolen bases. And he's got a 400 on-base percentage, a 900 OPS. You can't sit here and tell me that throughout the entire season, Juan Soto has been what you expected. You just can't. You cannot sit here and tell me that. If you're telling me that, then you just look at stats and you don't watch the games. Because he has not been the guy that we all expected. His numbers will end up just as good as the rest of his career? Absolutely. Better. In some ways better. He's got more stolen bases than ever. He's going to hit his second most home runs, maybe his most home runs of his career. But you can't tell me that off of year one, you expected this Juan Soto. You expected what he did in August and June for the entire season. And you got really 2 months of it. So, he's really just joined the party with inconsistent hitting on this team. When they're hot, they're hot. When they're not, they're a terrible watch. And that's what they've been all year and for years now. Now, if you're still here and you like this type of content, please subscribe, give me a like, comment whatever you think. Let me know what you think the Mets should do if they continue this terrible downtrend that they're on. Let me know in the comments. Anyway, after all that negative stuff, I'm still going to sit here and tell you that tonight I will be sitting down, watching the Mets, and hoping that everything I just said is completely wrong, and they change perception, and they go out and score 15 runs tonight, and, Clay Holmes somehow has this shutdown, gives you 7 shutdown innings. I would love it, and guess what? I'd probably make another video tomorrow saying the Mets are back. We're back. Because that's the life of a Mets fan. That's what we do. We live and die with every game. But what I would suggest to everyone, if you think what I've just said is all negative and there's no positive to it, you're probably just a more positive person than I am. But I'm telling you right now, I'm probably way more happy. Because I don't really care anymore. This season, to me, I've just written off as a lost season. If you haven't, and you're still really into it, and you really think they're going to turn it on, I almost feel bad for you. I envy you because you're an incredibly positive person, and you're probably a really nice person, and probably someone that gets along well with everyone, and you're a really nice person. But the truth is, it's probably better just not to care at this point, because I have no faith. I still have hope, but I have no faith in this team. And that's really all I got today. So, until next time, let's go Mets.